Okay, welcome everyone. I know I've met many of you before at the other events. Thank you for coming back, and some of you have are new to my event, so welcome. Karen Antonovich. If you can say that 3 times fast, I'll give you a prize. I've been doing these events since 2012, since I did one in the library in Attleboro for the 100-year anniversary of the Titanic sinking. So I did fashion aboard the Titanic, and it was so much fun, and the audience was so wonderful, like all of you are, that I just said, I've got to keep doing this. So in the meantime, my husband and I, some of you have been there, and some of you are going to go, came to, my husband and myself have a store called Nostalgia on the east side of Providence on Wickham Street. Has 3 floors of everything you can imagine. We have clothing, we have accessories, we have furniture, we have any kind of tchotchkes you can think of, and as someone just said to me, it's like a trip down memory lane everywhere you go. You see things you remember from childhood or whatever, so it's a lot of fun. But this is my passion, doing these events. I have a degree in historic fashion from URI, and although I did teach at the college level for 13 years, I realized that I like this audience better. The kids were just too into their phones, you know, they just weren't into the history. So that's my background in a nutshell, and again, welcome back, and welcome to those of you who are here for the first time. This is a tough topic in the sense that there are so many eras to cover. So what I decided to do the first time I did this was focus on just some of the ladies. Not all of them are necessarily known for their fashion, as we can think of a few, I'm sure, right now, but they may have been very important in history. So what I did was I kind of just picked some of them, and then I brought my collection has extended so much since we've owned the store, because people bring things into me, so I don't even really have to go look anymore, and I buy things from people from their collections so that I can show all of you. So those of you who have been here before, you know that you can come up and touch the things. It's not like a museum. These things are meant to be shared. So I have some beautiful representations from every period we'll talk about today. So I'll be going back and forth, and if I'm not loud enough, I'm pretty loud. If I'm not loud enough, just raise your hand and I'll try to speak a little louder. I think a microphone would be too much. I'd blast you right out of the room. You don't want that. Okay, so we're going to start way back. Please, if you have a question anytime, let me know. I'm very informal. Okay, Abigail Adams. Does anyone know, I'm going to ask questions along the line, and I have 6 little goodies to give away, and if you get the answer, you get one. So where was Abigail Adams born?
Quincy.
You're close.
Braintree.
Yes, who said that?
Really? Where? Weymouth.
You did a Spirits of Fashion pad to go with your pen. Very good. All right. So keep those thinking caps. That's the only work you have to do today. If I come up with a question. Okay, Abigail Adams. I have to do, there's so many people, I have to have this little stories I want to tell you, and sometimes I have to read you things. Okay, she moved in, they were the first tenants in the White House. Okay, but towards the end, John Adams' term, that's when they moved in, and they didn't really do anything to it. Abigail did not like, she resented the obligations of having to be First Lady and to entertain. So, and she didn't really care to change her appearance for the sake of fashion. So she wasn't considered a high fashion lady at all. But what she did do is she used the East Room, which the whole place, the White House was pretty empty. She used the East Room to dry her laundry. So that's, she did use the space. But she wasn't somebody that we could think of as fashionable in her time. However, before I get to the next First Lady, what I've done here, not to confuse you, is every time we go to an era, you know, this is early 1800s, I will show you the fashion of that period. And I will kind of go quickly because we'll be here till midnight otherwise, but just to give you an idea of what was going on fashion-wise. So just look quickly here. That was the old regime before the French Revolution. And then after the French Revolution, the styles changed completely, both in England especially and here, and France. And what we're seeing here is a very plain muslin type gown in many cases. it transitioned from that really crazy court dress to a little bit less frilly right here in 1790, and then by 1800 we're looking at these ladies that look almost like they don't have anything on. And that was the change that came about after the French Revolution. And what they did was they wore layers under it, but it was almost see-through. The fabric was so, you know, the muslins coming from India, sometimes calico, that kind of thing, but very flimsy. And that lasted for a while. If any of you are Jane Austen fans, that's the time period we're talking about. And any of the movies that were made on her novels, you see these types of fashions. Dolly Madison was really the first American fashion icon. She loved fashion. She loved to entertain. And she really believed in being social at the White House. She really felt it was an important role for her. So she was popular. People liked her. Now, she did indulge in French fashion. She was quite kind of spoiled that way. So she did tend to be very, very fashionable. And wear these low cut. Now, this was the style during this time, though. Everything was sort of pushed up and out. And sometimes the bodice was so low, didn't cover much. During the day, they would often have what they had a modesty piece over it. But for evening, you pretty much were showing what you had. And Dolly Madison continued to do that into her old age. And people liked her so much because she was so sociable that they accepted that about her. For a prize, the ladies, Dolly Madison's favorite accessory was what?
Headpiece?
What kind of headpiece? Who said that? Well, you might decide to give this to a table mate. I don't know. Yes. I even gave you a little bit of a cheater right there. Very good. Up to you what you want to do with that. There you go. Good job. Ladies, you're going to be fighting. The turban, she loved the turban. That was her favorite headpiece, and that kept on into her old age as well. That's her inauguration dress. Yes?
I like the spit curl.
Oh, yes, the little spit curl.
on
She was quite, yeah, do you remember having those?
I'm a hairdresser, so I
Yeah.
remember doing that.
Oh,
you know.
yeah.
And you used to pat it down and, you know.
Everything comes back. Remember that pink tape that you put in here? Okay, you know what I'm talking about. Yes.
The turban, where did it come from? Like, where's the fashion? From the French or still
Well, in the early
Middle
1800s, everybody was wearing, that's not everybody, but many women were wearing a turban style. They were looking back in history to it was called the neoclassical period. So they were looking back at classic Roman and Greek styles, and a lot of times those kinds of things were worn. So that came back, but she just never came out of it. She loved the turban so much, that was a good question, that she kept wearing it throughout her life. Okay, during this time, there was extreme fashion. And again, during that revolution, when they were really against the court dress, they went to this muslin look. And if you can see, you could see the stockings. Even though the dresses were long, they were so sheer, and sometimes the ladies sort of lifted them up a little bit and they're walking. It became very important that the shoes and the stockings were beautiful because they could be seen. This is called clocking. That's embroidery on stockings. And men have that too, in many cases. And so the ladies who went to the extreme would wear these muslin dresses and cashmere shawls from India, which were also very fashionable. And this is called the red cap of liberty. And that was, again, going for, you know, the freedom from having the tyrannical monarchy. Okay. The men had the very, very high, it's my favorite period for men, this period, high necks, cravats, and, you know, kind of tight coats and tight pantaloons. So they had to be in pretty good shape to wear that. And this is called that's the cockade, the red, white, and blue cockade, again, for the same reason, that freedom. That was being demonstrated by the dress. Yes?
So these were mostly in the high society? You wouldn't see them?
Yeah, you would see the high society. You know, probably not just nobility, but people who could afford to dress a little bit better.
How much would be a dress like that?
Boy, that's a good question. A lot of them were made. for them by dressmakers. You're not really looking at buying a dress off the rack like you do
No,
now.
but I mean, how much would it cost to make a dress for them?
I really couldn't answer that honestly. I know that material from India was probably costly at the time because it was imported, you know. But it's a good question. I mean, compared to what we pay now, very little bit, but to them it was still fairly costly. It's all relative. That's a good question. We'll have to look that up and find out what they were paying for that back then.
And the gloves were still popular? I'm sorry, the gloves were still popular?
What
Gloves, the gloves?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Very, oh,
Yeah.
wow.
What was the question?
If gloves were still popular. Yeah. One more thing is it's a terrible style from that period when Marie Antoinette was beheaded. There was one style called the a la victime, and the ladies would cut their hair really roughly, not shave it, but cut it really short and kind of rough, just like they would do before they beheaded someone. And then they would wear a red velvet ribbon around their neck to symbolize the beheading. Terrible, but it was just showing support. I always like to throw cartoons because whenever they had an extreme style, they would make fun of it and give you a stiff wind, and you got a little bit of a problem.
You do, absolutely.
A little risque. This is just showing you that empire silhouette during this period. Again, muslin, a lot of muslin, but the very high empire waist, and sleeves could be all various types, just to give you a little bit of what was going on. This was all gathered in the back. This is outdoor wear. It's always good to know what's going on over the dress that they wear. And they had several styles. Whenever, and you probably heard me talk about this before when I talked about Downton Abbey, when something changes in terms of silhouette, the outer clothing has to reflect that. Because if you have a full dress, you can't wear a slim coat over it. But in this case, the dress is slim, so this is called a pelisse, P-E-L-I-S-S-E, and this was worn over the dresses. This is a jacket called a spencer that was worn both indoors and out over the dress. And then you've got your cashmere shawls as well. So very, a few different possibilities. Look at the size of the muff, ladies. Huge. Crazy. Okay, this young lady, Julia Tyler, shocked people. What she did was she agreed to be part of an ad for a New York City department store in 1839, and she was a celebrity overnight, but it wasn't considered proper. So that she wasn't, they didn't do this with people. But she did marry a sitting president in 1844, John Tyler. So she was only in the White House for a very short time. It was 9 months, and she was very social. So they had quite a vibrant social world for that 9 months that she was in the White House. So, but she shocked people with that. Ladies just didn't go into advertising or theater or anything like that. But she did. And that's her right there, beautiful portrait of her. She was attractive, She looks like a little bit, kind of rebellious to me. A little bit like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Yeah. She's cute. Okay, so now we're up into the 20s and into the 30s and 40s. So I wanted to just show you how the silhouette changed. And what you see here is in the 1820s, remember we're coming from that long silhouette, it's still pretty much the same, except that the skirt gets a little bit wider and more decorative at the bottom. And then you'll start to see some emphasis coming out towards the shoulder. So 1820s, you start to see some change. It's not so column-like. It starts to have a little more skirt. And by the 1830s, check out those sleeves. They were so big and puffy, they would put actual supports in the sleeves. And think about if you stuffed a bunch of tissue
Could
paper.
hide something in there.
Yeah, you could. You could smuggle things. They were called gigot sleeves, G-I-G-O-T, but the people who made fun of the extreme style called them imbecile sleeves. They figured you don't have to be an imbecile to walk around with that. And notice that the skirts are not only getting wider, but then you can see their ankles there too. So hemlines go up and down a little bit as well. So you've got the waistline back to the normal, And then you've got a wider skirt with really wide shoulders. Why would they have this? This is called a la chinoise, top knot. Why would they do that?
Chinese?
For height, to balance, very good. To
Oh.
balance that width, very good.
Oh, wow. Is that a heavy thing?
There you go, good job. Okay, see, sometimes it's not hard. All right. This is the example of extreme, crazy sleeves. Now, you had to have money to be able to dress like this. This was a way to show off. And any kind of extreme fashion is always the same thing. It's a way to show people, I don't have to work. I don't have to do manual labor. I can dress in these ridiculous fashions because I don't have to move much. I just have to show off. She couldn't if she wanted to. That's right. The pelisse that I mentioned from the earlier period was also repeated here, but it had a wider skirt to accommodate the dresses underneath. So that's the pelisse. And then we go into Queen Victoria's reign. Now, she reigned from 1837 until her death in 1901. Did any of you watch the series Victoria? Did you love it? Wasn't the fashion wonderful? I just loved it. I loved it. If you like that and you haven't yet seen it, there's a movie that came out earlier that was made, a Hollywood movie, with Emily Blunt called The Young Victoria. And that was beautiful too. Wonderful. It was about her youth, like we're seeing in the series. And just worth seeing. It's just a 2-hour film, and the fashion was great. You'll see in the series Victoria, you saw that style that she wore with the braid going over the ear, or under the ear. And she actually was very, very impressive fashion-wise, even if she didn't mean to be. She was a very young queen, and so she was looked to for style very early on. But something happened in the 1860s. Something happened, and Victoria changed her style and color for the rest of her life. Who can tell me that? Who do I go to?
Oh, no.
Were you the first one? Okay, I didn't. All right, ladies, you still have a chance. She went to black. Why? Because Albert died. She loved Albert so much that she, I'm sorry ladies, I wish I had a whole bunch more of these. That's for you. Okay, Albert died young, and Victoria, from what has been said, not only wore black for the rest of her life, but she used to lay out his clothes every evening. Isn't that awful? What jewelry became important? Jewelry, mourning jewelry, sometimes made from onyx or jet, sometimes made with hair of the loved one. Have you ever seen jewelry like that, the hair jewelry? Or other things. I've seen exhibitions where there's whole wreaths with someone's hair. Sometimes it wasn't for mourning. Sometimes it was worn, like let's say you became engaged to a gentleman, and he might wear a lock of your hair at a breast, on a lapel, or she might wear a lock of his hair. So it wasn't always for regarding death. But black clothing became very important and very fashionable. And mourning, really, to be proper in Victoria's time, you mourned for a year and a day in black. Black crepe, too, because it's dull. And then after a year, you could start to wear dark gray, dark purple, so you'd be in half again. Yeah, but that was the proper thing to do. Here's your Victoria type styles in that early period, the 1830s. What you see happening here is the sleeves that you saw that was so big, by Victoria's time, 1837, when she came to the throne, they started to deflate. And the fullness started to come down, so it's down here, but not here. So you start to see a tight, so that by the 1840s, the whole sleeve is going to be pretty much straight and tight. So, but you're seeing the skirt getting a little wider. You still have emphasis at the shoulder, but nothing like we saw about 5 years earlier than that. 1840s, I always think of this sort of, kind of, almost utilitarian and darker colors, less, ornamentation. They had beautiful bonnets though, but they didn't have as much of the fancy lace and all of that that we saw earlier. So the 1840s were a little darker, and you see that the skirts have come back down to the floor. So they're not showing the ankles at this point. So it's interesting to see that. And yeah, don't have anybody in there. We already talked about the 40s for the first ladies. Don't worry, I'm coming back to the ladies. Just wanted to see what's going on. This is the crinoline period. The 1850s and 60s, we're talking wider and wider skirts. So now we're going to look at Harriet Lane Johnston. We'll see her in a minute. And she had been a hostess for her uncle, James Buchanan. And so she really helped him out, and she went to Paris with him when he was a diplomat. What was nice about that was that she was, actually she didn't go to Paris, she went to England. And she was able to hang out with Victoria, Queen Victoria's court. She bought a lot of fashions from Paris. Okay, so she was close enough that she was able to get influence and buy fashions there. But this is what we're looking at by the 1850s. We start to see a much wider silhouette. This is a beautiful evening dress that you see here. Whenever you see bare shoulders, always evening. You're not going to see that during the day, not during this period. Okay, this is Harriet Lane Johnston, the first to be called First Lady. That's her inauguration dress right there. And again, she was hostess for James Buchanan, her uncle. And again, she got very, very happy about being hostess when she came into the White House. So that's Miss Johnston. So she's right before we have our friend Mary Todd Lincoln coming up. But so she had pretty clothes. That's pretty modern, I think, for the period. So that was her inauguration dress. And they had this funky hairdo by now, and into the early 60s too, where it's like they had two bumps on the side of their head. You know what I'm talking about? What was that? Yeah, they look almost like Princess Leia with the big coffin. God rest her soul. Okay. Again, always making fun of the extreme fashions. Now, something important to know about this period. Prior to 55, 56, ladies filled their skirts out by wearing numbers of petticoats underneath. So they literally had to drag their skirts around. A wonderful invention came along called the cage crinoline, which was weightless. Yeah, and the crinoline, what was so nice about it is it could make the skirt very wide, but it eliminated the need for so many petticoats, and it was much lighter. So the ladies got to have these big bell-shaped skirts. So think Gone with the Wind, the early part of that movie where you saw the ball gowns. And her maid can't get close to her to do her corset, so she has to lie on the strap. So they're always making fun of the fashions. This is just quickly what happens once you start to see the 1860s come in. Think about the Civil War. You start to see the skirts, not that it's not going to have fullness, but it's going to flatten in the front and get fuller in the back to prepare us for the bustle period. So we're getting that happening, and the necks are getting higher, especially for daytime. And then you see an off-the-shoulder for evening. And you also see the waistline kind of coming up again. It seems to go up and down. In the 1860s, it came up a little bit. And as I said, the fullness starts to go towards the back. And the sleeve comes down the shoulder. So the arm's eye, where the seam would be, is a little bit lower. It's interesting. You'll see an example of that. But let me just show you really quickly what these dresses look like. That's called a pagoda sleeve. And they would wear something underneath called an engagement, or it's an undersleeve, that would pin to it. And those could be laundered. So when they had a high neck like that, and then those types of sleeves, the sleeves and the neck could be removed, that collar could be removed and washed. Yeah, because they're not going to be throwing these things in the wash. So it's very interesting to see what happens when the styles change, but that is something that they have to have cotton or linen to be able to launder that. And if you look closely, you can see where the crinoline ends. I'm going to go back for a second. Oh, I know why.
Between those two stripes.
And then this one, I think this is the one you can see the crinoline. That's why I wanted to. Yes, see right there? You can see. How beautiful is that dress? you know, if even if you didn't care about history that much, you just like looking at the clothes, think about the work that went into the clothing back then and how much detail it required and how well it was made compared to what we get today. Okay, anytime there's a war, there's going to be military inspiration. So you're looking at a couple of things. There was a red blouse that ladies could wear, or red shirts for little girls and boys, called the Garibaldi blouse. And that was named after General Garibaldi from Italy. His soldiers wore this kind of a shirt as well. So that was one. This is an 1862 Peterson's Magazine advertisement for these pieces. And then the Zouave jacket was adapted from the Algerian soldiers' influence, and one troop in the Civil War regiment wore those. And so that's the troop right here, these cadets. I'll show you, it's very small. Oop, sometimes that thing gets away from me. There are the cadets in the little short jackets that have the braiding usually bordering them. And then here, that's called a Swiss belt. If you remember, if you saw Gone with the Wind as many times as I did, the dress she's going to wear to the ball and the barbecue has a big, big green velvet one just like that. That's a Swiss belt that was very popular in the 1860s. Okay, again, I already told you this, but you see how the 1850s and early 60s tended to be wide skirts, and then by the end of the 60s, you're looking at almost no fullness, but a lot of detail going towards the back, and that's when the bustle's going to come in. Yes?
You know that big one with the three ruffles?
Yes.
I wonder how heavy that would have been, the material, to carry that around.
If it was a winter garment, like wool, yeah, it wouldn't have been that light.
Wow.
You're right.
Wow.
In fact, at one point, you reminded me of this, at one point in the early, during the 50s, the seam, they used to have one-piece dresses, but it would have the seam in the middle, the waist seam. Because of the heavy petticoats, it started to break apart from the bodice. The bodice and skirt would separate. So what happened was the dressmakers started to make the bodice a separate piece from the skirt, so that they didn't have to worry about it ripping. Has anyone ever heard of Charles Frederick Worth? I might have mentioned him during Downton Abbey. I hope I did. Pretty sure I did. Charles Frederick Worth was the first couturier in France, and he made beautiful gowns for the very wealthy. And people would order their fashions from Paris, even if they lived in the U.S., and be able to be beautifully dressed. And one of his things was that he would make a skirt and two bodices, one for day and one for evening.
Oh.
And you're going to see an example of that with one of our first ladies. That's coming up. And there's our Mary Todd Lincoln. Now, tell me about what you think about her. Not for a prize, just what you think of her. Because you could say anything, you know.
Depression.
Huh?
Depression.
She has,
depressed.
yeah, especially when she lost her husband. But what was she disliked for?
Extravagant.
Yes, she was very extravagant. She spent a lot of money. And by the time her husband was killed, she pretty much ended up destitute because she just ran out of money. And nobody wanted to take her on, you know, so she pretty much ended up alone. It was quite sad. She did wear some kind of risque garments in the evening, but this is what I wanted to read to you. She was criticized for wearing expensive mourning garment when her son Willie died. And people, of course, are going to gossip, and they said, well, she couldn't have loved him too much if, you know, she's wearing this expensive clothing, whatever. But there was a magazine called Leslie's Magazine, and they praised her for her stylish gowns that, why do I think I can read this without my glasses, that displayed the exquisitely molded shoulders and arms of our fair Republican queen. So some of them really admired her, but she did spend a lot of money on household accounts and on her dress, of course, and her accessories. She also, again, ruined herself financially after Lincoln's death. So she pretty much, that was a very sad life. And again, depression, and just, I don't think she was a happy woman overall. There she is again. Here she is as a younger woman.
Yeah.
But look at the, wow,
Brothers
you
were
know,
Southerners. They held
a
slaves.
little risque. Did anyone see the movie Lincoln with Sally Field as Mrs.? So you're going to see this. If I'm blasting you out, I will put it lower. I just want to make sure you can hear it. So beware, ladies. You're right in front of the speakers. Okay, here it comes.
Mrs. Lincoln.
Madam President, if you please. Don't convene another subcommittee to investigate me, sir. I'm teasing. Smile, Senator Wade.
I believe I am smiling, Mrs. Lincoln. As long as your household accounts are in order, ma'am, we'll have no need to investigate them.
You have always taken such a lively, even prosecutorial interest in my household accounts.
The household accounts have always been so interesting.
Yes, thank you. It's true. The miracles I have wrought. I have fertilizer bills and cutlery invoices, but I had to.
Short and sweet. She was very good in that role. Very good.
When she made that movie, she had to put on 25 pounds.
Oh, yes, she did. Yes, because Mary Todd was not a slim woman. Yeah, I can imagine being an actor or an actress and having to lose and gain weight like that. Oh, it's crazy. Really. Before I move on to Lucretia Garfield, I want to show you something really quickly. This is one of the oldest pieces I have. I had a woman come in, and her great-great-aunts, two great-great-aunts, had a trunk full of clothes. And this woman who came into the store used to play, she and her sister used to play with the clothes. Well, she brought them into me. And one of those pieces is this amazing two-piece outfit. Now, it had been a 60s piece, but it was redone for a bustle. So they remade it into a bustle dress. And the plaid is kind of a giveaway of that. Queen Victoria loved plaid. She had that house at Balmoral. And so she wore a lot of plaid, dressed her children in plaid. And this is a plaid piece, very typical of 1860s. But the dress was then made into something that would fit a bustle. So be sure, and then it has the beautiful little pin that you put at the neckline. So I will have you can come and take a look at that. I actually have a bustle and a bonnet. And we'll talk about the different types of bustles, but this would have been fitted around the waist and, of course, sticking out of the back so that your dress would drape elegantly over it. And it would be, you'd be carrying around a little bit bigger butt than normal. So that's an actual bustle from, no, just that much.
Three
Yeah.
different, oh.
Isn't that something? And then the bonnet, I researched this, and it looks like it's probably closest to 1860s, this bonnet. So be sure you take a look at that as well. So those are some of my oldest pieces. Okay, Lucretia Garfield, I actually have a doll that I'm going to show you in a minute that is of her, from the Smithsonian collection that they have these dolls. Lucretia Garfield was 1881 only. Her husband was shot in 1881 in July, and he died in September. She nursed him through that whole time, even though she was still recovering from malaria herself. So she must have been something else. And she looks like quite a, stoic woman, although everybody did back then with the photographs, didn't they? But 1880, she would have worn a bustle. The thing is about the 1880s, the early 80s, the bustle had three shapes. The first shape from the 70s was like a waterfall effect. It was a lot of draping in the back of the skirt. The late 1870s and early 80s, all of the decorations started moving down the skirt. So you're not seeing this big bustle back here. 1885, let's say, now we're talking, it looks like a shelf. So that it looks like you could put a tea tray on it. So the bustle, really three different kinds of decoration. I find that period really fascinating. Frances Folsom Cleveland was considered very beautiful. She was very young. And she, of course, was born during the same or was around during the same period. This is interesting, 1886 to 89 for Grover Cleveland, and then 1893 to 97. So 80s and 90s, she was a first lady. And the men loved her because she was beautiful, and the women emulated her fashion. So the women wanted to be her. The men wanted to be with her or whatever. But, she was attractive. Definitely.
Say it right.
Yeah, there you go. Widely copied. And this is what I was talking about with different bodices that could go with different skirts. I don't know. I don't think that's a worth. It could be, but I don't know for sure. But just having different, you could mix and match that way. If you had your dressmaker make you separate bodices for your skirts. Yeah.
Good idea.
Sort of like, you know when you used to be able to buy those suits, you had pants and a skirt? Same kind of thing, to be practical. Here she is again. That's her inauguration dress. Absolutely beautiful. Look at that evening dress. Yeah.
Is it embroidered?
You know,
The pattern?
I think it's like a brocade. I'm pretty sure that's a brocade. I'd have to actually see it up close. I don't know that it's been embroidered, but isn't it beautiful?
Yeah.
Very fancy. She was very lovely. Okay, so here's your bustles just to demonstrate. You've got your waterfall bustle. You've got your moving down the back of the skirt. And then you've got your shelf-like bustle. So 3 different types entirely. But they kept bringing that button back again, didn't they? Well, you could move it to the side. Yes. Have you ever seen The Age of Innocence with Michelle Pfeiffer? And beautiful movie made in, I think, the early 90s or late 80s. And it's about the 1870s in New York high society. And Winona Ryder and Michelle Pfeiffer are 2 of the stars. And you see them sitting down, and they sort of move their bustle over.
I thought you could almost put it over the chair.
Yeah, I think they did that a lot with their big wide gowns. But what happened was a lady was never supposed to put her back against the chair anyway. So they had to sit forward anyway, so they can kind of move it out of the way. But yeah, very, very different. 1890s, it was all about the sleeves again.
Oh my goodness.
Except that it's a little different shape. This is what they call a leg of mutton, because it looks like a big old leg of lamb. And isn't that beautiful? I don't know, I just think that's gorgeous. And that's a fashion plate. Look at the waistline. So they're still corseting like crazy, for sure. So the hourglass shape is back again. So Frances Cleveland would have been in part of that, because she was there till 97. So she would have been there. The waist, very, very corseted, yes. Here's what they call like a traveling or tailor-made. The ladies started to get jealous of the gentlemen's British tailoring in their suits, so they decided they kind of wanted a suit too. So they could travel in it, they could, day wear, it was good day wear, but look at the sleeves on that one. And you'll be seeing something I have that's sort of between this period and the next period I have over there. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, during this period, we also started to see the shirtwaist. What became very popular in the 1890s to bring women into a little bit more comfortable clothing? What sport became really big in the 1890s?
Tennis.
Tennis, but there's another one.
Horseback.
Croquet.
All of these, but more. No, horseback riding was around for a while. Something that they required, they had to buy something. Well, it was, I'm going to give it away.
Yeah.
You know?
Baseball.
No, but these are all good guesses.
Tennis.
It's a sport, but more recreation, not competitive.
Bocce.
Huh?
Okay.
Bocce.
Oh, you're good.
Pool.
Everything but. You ladies have named everything but. That's hysterical. I know, I can't because I wouldn't know who to give to. Bicycling. Bicycling, those big wheels. Yeah, that was kind of a tricky one. Sorry. All right. But anyway, bicycling. You'll get the next one. This time period, the shirtwaist, they had whole factories that would make these. So it's sort of like what we think of as a blouse. So in the 1890s, that became very popular. And as more and more women went into the workforce, they started to wear these shirtwaists with skirts. Now, there were shirtwaist factories. If you've ever heard of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, 1911, that burned down and killed all those poor women, that's an example of whole factories, and that's how popular these were. Okay, we have Alice Roosevelt Longworth, Teddy's daughter. So TR's daughter, not the other Roosevelt. She was rebellious and full of the old Harry, as they say. She lived to be 96 years old, and she was just full of it. She loved being a hostess to help fill in at times, that she could, be part of that social scene as well. Later in life, when she was, I gotta read this to you, when she was criticized by the media, she said, the trouble with reporters is that they expect me to wear a halo and I only wear a hat. She was kind of full of it. So she filled in at the White House. Her fame continued long after her dad's office ended in 1908, and she wore the latest fashions, including Paul Poiret's hobble skirt, which you saw in the Downton Abbey one, the very narrow skirt. You'll see that again in a minute. She wore that. She shocked Washington by wearing a ball gown that was short enough to provide a glimpse of her evening slippers and ankles, and she wore Oriental-style pajamas in public. So she didn't care, which is probably why she lived till 96. Isn't that amazing? So very inspiring as a young woman and even as an older woman. Okay, you remember this from Downton, some of you ladies. This was called the S-curve. When we get into the Edwardian period, which is 1901, after Victoria died and King Edward came to the throne, now we're talking even more uncomfortable. Because if you remember, some of you be saying, the corset was designed to not only get the butt out there again, but to bring the breast forward. So it's like an S-curve, and it hurts to do this. And this was called the monobosom, because it looks like one big boob. And it wasn't separated. And that's a shirt waist, and this, because of this crazy front, it's called a pigeon front, because it was so long in the front compared to the back that you could puff it up. So let me give you an example of a real piece I have right here. This is one of the pieces I got from a woman I worked with at one time. This is for her families. Be sure you come up before you leave to see the detail in this. The amount of work. But the reason I'm showing you is because this muslin would never have shown. It would have been tucked into the skirt and belted. But look at the back is shorter than the front. And if you pull those together, you see there's all that extra fabric. That forms the pigeon front. And there's about 1,000 hooks and eyes on it. So absolutely amazing work. The detail is just incredible on that. So be sure you come up to see that. So that is that particular period, the S-curve. So I'll be coming back and forth a lot, because now I have more to show you. This is an example. See how it's all puffy in the front? And then her skirt's flat in the front, and it's belted. And those are some real-life people in this style, with their little shirtwaists on. Then the style changed again. In about 1908, you start to see a slimmer line again. You almost see a little bit closer to the Empire. If you've seen the movie Titanic with Kate Winslet, you see that fashion in that movie. And this is from the same lady that I got the bodice from. And this is from that period. It could be a mourning piece, because a lot of people died in her family, but she wasn't positive. Because people could still wear black. It didn't have to be for mourning. But you have to come up and see this close. Not only does it have an amazing amount of lace, detailed lace, it has all of these little balls hanging off of it, and embroidery, and it's that same sort of higher waistline with a straighter skirt. So that would be the period following that Edwardian period. So I'm going to put these here, and I'll put them back later. Okay, so you're seeing how things are progressing? And there's our friends from Downton. Remember when I talked about the higher waist again, and then the big, big hats? And that period of time lasted almost to the 20s. You start to see that the waistline's going to start to come down in the teens during the war. This is Paul Poiret. I've talked about him before. He's that really innovative designer that came up with this Turkish trousers. If you remember from Downton when Sybil wore that crazy outfit that looked very much like this and shocked her family. This is called the lampshade dress. And he also came out with a hobble skirt, which was very, very narrow at the bottom. And there's the turbans, that's back again. And look at how narrow the hobble skirt was. Here it says, yet they say women are making great strides. It didn't walk. And some women would actually, this was a fashion, right below the knees, they would sort of bind their knees to make it a hobble skirt. And under here it says the hobble skirt. What's that? It's the new speed limit skirt. So they're holding women back in one way or another. And then we get to the 20s. So we're going to be rolling forward a little bit quicker now. The 20s, of course, you're looking at the much lower waist, the sort of flattened bosom, if you will, that boyish look. And we know, I could go on and on about the 20s, but you know it was that women's right to vote at the same time as Prohibition. So a lot was going on. But I do have a dress from the 1920s. This was someone's wedding dress, and she brought this in to me. It's actually silk velvet, and it has this beautiful chiffon trim, and it's from the 20s, definitely from the 20s, and you can see that low waist and very flat front. So this would have been worn for special occasions, and I always say to people, make sure you touch this, because velvet of today is not like silk velvet. There's no comparison to the way silk feels, silk velvet. You know, you can get polyester, you can get acetate. Doesn't come close. So make sure you can feel that. And this is probably late 20s, early 30s. I just acquired this recently. It has a lot of damage, but it's worth seeing, and it's that same silk velvet. So this was probably late 20s, early 30s. Has a lot of beautiful detail up here with rhinestones, but somebody probably had it on a hanger. And the weight of the stones will always tear the fabric. So make sure you see that too. Okay, as far as our ladies of the time period, we have Grace Coolidge, who in the 20s, she was First Lady from 23 to 29, very glamorous evening gowns, and she declined interviews, she didn't want to be interviewed, but she was very outgoing to people who came to the White House. So I think she was well liked. But look at that beautiful beaded 20s evening dress. And there she is in more of like a floral, typical floral day dress, with the cloche hats that they wore back then, and then of course her portrait. 30s was all about the Depression over here, and how the skirts not only went back down in length, the waistline came back down to normal, and it was a very slim look. And that's why I say that velvet dress I just showed you was closer to the 30s. If it was the woman who brought it in said it was 20s, but I think it was either really late 20s or early 30s, once the Depression started. I have some beautiful shoes from the 30s. They were never worn. I bought them at a vintage fair, and they have the ties very typical if you look at shoes from this period. So make sure you get a look at those. They're beautiful. I also have a hat from the 30s that has a little rhinestone detail. And unlike the cloche hats that would go flat over the head, these would tend to be worn to the side. And has a little bit of a veil that's still intact. So make sure you come and take a look. That's a nice velvet too. And then this is a dress probably from mid-30s, and all of this metal beading, and all of the hooks and eyes on the side, and then it all has all those buttons. That's a good 30s, early 40s example. Yeah. Even late 40s. My mother's wedding gown had all of those right down the front. So that's a 30s piece. Here's some more 30s day dresses. That sort of darker colors and really small print was popular in the 30s. And then the difference by the time you get to the late 30s and 40s is you start to see the much shorter hems, especially when we get into World War II. Everything starts to be rationed, and you start to have shortages of things. So shorter skirts, but wider shoulders. You start to see the padding in the shoulders at that point. So that's a big difference between the 30s and into the late 30s, early 40s. It's a very big difference. And I have a dress from the 40s that I wore to my stepson's wedding last October. I love this dress. There's nothing wrong with it. It's definitely a 40s piece. Has the metal zipper. These are not pockets. They are made to look like pockets. I love this dress. It was comfortable. Nobody had one like it. It's not like you have to worry about somebody else in your dress when you go to a wedding. So that made me really happy. And I remember I forgot my shoes. I was going to wear these, silver. So, you know, what a shame I had to go out and buy a new pair of shoes. My husband's like, well, all right, whatever. I blamed him because he left. I told him to take the bag and he left him, so it was his fault. Okay, Eleanor Roosevelt. We know she was no fashion plate, but she was important in history. She's the first lady to be on radio broadcast. She was all for women and women's rights, as we know, and her opinion was respected by FDR. So, you know, she was listened to, and she had a forceful way about her. Yes?
How tall was she? Does she look tall?
She looks tall. I don't think she was that tall. I don't think she was short, but I don't think she was tall. Yeah, was she? Do you know how tall she was?
I think she was pretty tall.
Yeah? I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, it was very tall.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Let's see her shoes.
Yeah, I know. Just quickly, in the war, you had to worry about how wide your skirts were, and they call that sweep. You could not have, during the restrictions, they needed material too much. So you had to have a much, much thinner skirt and very little detail. You couldn't have patch pockets. So they had to be very inventive. So I'm going to just turn that around so you can see how cool that is. They actually just took the same material. Isn't that beautiful? So they were very inventive. And of course the 40s hats were crazy. All kinds of materials they would use. They'd use cork or rope for the wedges in the shoes because they couldn't get leather. And one other question, and I'm running out of these, so I want somebody to be able to get this. I've got two more. Okay. What was taken from ladies that made them have to be really inventive during the war? Something they had just... Yes, who said that first? All right. It's coming down. Nylon stockings. And they had to do what, ladies?
Oh, they drew lines.
They drew lines on the back of their legs because they wanted to look like they had seam stockings. And then had the leg makeup. And then finally, we're going to head into the 50s. After the war ended in 45, in the spring collection for Christian Dior, I'm sure you've heard, yes.
Eleanor was 5'11".
Wow, was she really?
5'11".
Oh, I wish I had known that. I didn't realize that.
Wow,
5'11"?
You better put that in your notes.
I'm going to put that in my notes.
Put that in your notes.
Well, how tall was FDR? I wonder if she was tall.
Okay, well, now.
He must have been 6 feet. Yes.
You
40s? Yeah. They started to become more popular. Yes, 40s. 6'2", so what a couple. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. The new look was all about getting rid of that austere fashion from the 40s. So Dior felt, he wanted to soften the shoulder. This suit that I have on is late 40s, early 50s, and it still has the shoulder pads. But it's more like a 40s. It's just, I think it had been hemmed because I think it should have been longer than this in the 40s. So even early 50s. So but it is an old. I think it was somebody hemmed it before I got it. But anyway, a softer shoulder, nip that baby waist in again, and full skirt and longer. Because they could. They didn't have the restrictions anymore. So how did they get that look? Yes?
Is the bottom tulle?
Yes. Yes. Sometimes a skirt was made of tulle, and sometimes it was only the petticoat underneath. I have a dress from the period. I got married in this. My husband and I, 5 years ago, had a Mad Men themed wedding. And I found this in an antique store. It was hanging right at the register. Somebody must have just brought it in. And it has all of the tulle underneath it. And it fit. Now this was so typical. This banding like this. And it does have the zipper. But keep in mind, the fabric didn't have any give back then. We didn't have really lycra in use for this yet. So I could zip it But if I wanted to breathe and eat that day, I had to wear Spanx. And I did. But it was worth it. Here is, even though this looks like a corset, it's 50s, ladies. 50s. How would you like to wear one of those again? Sorry. Had to bring that out. Had to do it. You had two choices. Nowadays we have so many different choices in fashion, but back then it was pretty much two silhouettes. You either had the wide skirt or the really slim, almost like the hobble skirt, except that it was just below the knee. It wasn't all the way to the ground. And again, try to walk in that thing. The waist was pushed in, pulled in as tight as you could get it. And what was with the pointy breasts? The bras are all cone shaped with concentric circles. I don't know what to tell you. And there they are. Sometimes the ladies didn't have a whole lot going on with hips, so they could have padding in their girdles. Give them the hips. But the pointy breasts that was the style and the standard at the time. And that's what they did. What else do I have over there? Okay, Mamie Eisenhower in the 50s. She was she didn't want to dress like a dowdy. She didn't want to look dowdy. So she kept up with styles, and she was even known to wear evening dresses that were almost like prom gowns that high school girls would wear. And so she was kind of admired but criticized for it too. Her favorite color, as you can probably guess, was pink. And even like things that this isn't hers, but it's an example of one. Her lipstick cases even had the pink color. So she was really into the color pink. I don't know, and she had these Mamie bangs, and for that period of time, before Jackie, that was the style for even young women who've seen that style. So Mamie was into pink, that was her thing. What a beautiful red suit, though. And this is the precursor to Jackie's style, because remember, she always had that bracelet sleeve. And then just quickly, going from the 50s into the 60s and the mod look. So if you saw Mad Men, we talked about that in cocktail culture. Even in the early 60s, the women were still often wearing the full 50s styles. And then like around, 64, 63 even, 64 in London, you started with this mod style that came out. And some really cool stuff came out of that. And I'm going to show you right now before I finish. This was really pretty much left over from the 50s or early 60s. And I wore this to a wedding. It's a real piece from the time. It has a beautiful bow. It's got this gorgeous sort of ikat weave. And look at the back. It's the same print and chiffon instead of, isn't that gorgeous? So that's from that period. But
oh Lord, no.
what is it?
Test dress.
Huh?
Test dress.
Okay, wait a minute. I got one more. Think carefully. What's it made of?
A shift dress?
Silk.
Potato sack.
Looks like burlap.
That's
What became popular for a short time in the 60s?
Plastic.
Close.
Vinyl.
I'll give you a hint.
Yeah.
Couldn't be worn very many times. Yes, who said that? It's a paper dress. Good job. This was owned by one of our vendors from the store. This vendor, and she became a friend of mine, she and her sister and mother saved everything I think they've ever worn. This was, I think, her mom's. And it's definitely a paper, it's been treated, but it's a paper dress. Campbell's Soup had paper dresses with the Campbell, like the Warhol, with all the cans. If you look on eBay and you look for paper dresses and they're still in the container they came in, we're talking thousands of dollars. And then last but not least, remember the late 60s, early 70s with the maxis? I wore this to a wedding too. And really splashy print. Remember the Hawaiian prints became popular? So that's another one there. Well, before I move on and we finish up, because we're almost done, I just acquired these recently. These are shoes from the 50s. Remember the lucite plastics and vinyl and all of that? This came in the box with extra heels and hardware in case you needed to have it fixed. It's all here. So make sure you see that. I have another 50s bag. This is made out of snakeskin, structured. Of course, gloves were worn, the longer ones because of the bracelet sleeves, and short ones for the longer sleeve. Lucite bag.
That's adorable.
How gorgeous is that? Now, we couldn't fit, okay, could we fit everything in there? Was it barely your cell phone? Exactly. Almost done. I have a whimsy. Do you remember these? In its box, you just put, it's a net, you just put it over your bouffant hairdo, that's right. And last but not least, two of my favorite things that I have. I think I showed you this for cocktail culture, so I'll hold on. I just got this recently. What is it?
Cigarette case.
It's made of snakeskin. Watch what happens. It just pops open.
Yeah.
And there's unfiltered, of course it's so short, so it's only unfiltered cigarettes, Chesterfield. I love this.
Oh my God.
And it's still in the box. And then last but not least, this is the last thing I have, is the carryall. Do you remember this, some of you? This was used in, this was a 50s piece. You could get this back in the early 1900s. But this particular one's from the 50s. You open it up, and I broke the mirror. Hopefully it's not bad luck. Yes, and there's little rouge, never used, with the powder. You could put creams in here. This is powder, little powder puff, and a little applicator, and then a lipstick tube with no lipstick in it. You would fill it. And then last but not least, for your cigarettes. So this was never used. This is fabulous. I love this. And then we save the best for last. Everybody, I know myself, I associate the First Lady with Jackie Kennedy. And I just think she just had an elegance that just hasn't been matched. People have tried. And, you know, some of the First Ladies dressed beautifully, but she just had something. And it was tragic what she went through. That was her inauguration dress right here. What a couple. The pink suit that she wore when her husband was killed, she took the whole thing, the matching hat, the bag, the shoes, everything to the National Archives, as is. I don't think they cleaned it. I think they kept it, you know. I mean, that was part of her story, part of her history, but always with the bracelet sleeves. She wore a lot of Chanel-type suits, and Oleg Cassini was her main designer, and then Halston did her hats. And of course, I get kids come in the store, I can get a lot of students in the store, and they love these hats, but they're like, it doesn't fit. I'm like, no, you wouldn't pull it over your ears, it would go on your bouffant hairdo. And they're like, oh. So they don't quite get that. Did anyone see the movie Jackie? It's my last little video. Okay, I liked it. Some people didn't really like her in it. I thought it was really good. So this one, you'll enjoy seeing the clothes.
People like to believe in fairy tales. Of course.
And you?
I believe that the characters we read about on the page end up being more real than the men who stand beside us.
Oh, so awful.
I was like, Jack, can you hear me? Jack, I love you, Jack.
People need their history.
They need to know that real men actually lived here.
I've grown accustomed to a great divide between what people believe and what I know to be real.
And how would you like him remembered?
There should be more horses, more soldiers.
Why are you doing this, Mrs. Kennedy?
There's more crying, more cameras.
This is making us look like our parents. Let's move on with you. You don't have to do this.
I will march with Jack. Alone if necessary. I'm not the first lady anymore. I lost track somewhere. What was real? What was performance?
I thought it was pretty well done.
I'm guessing you won't allow me to write any of that.
No. Because I never said that.
You hear that? You won't let me write any of this? Nope, I never said it. Yeah, I thought it was fascinating. I really did. Okay, we're finishing up real quick. There's your paper dress. That's the super dress from Campbell Soup Company. And then, of course, so that's pop art, like Andy Warhol. And then op art, or optical art, the black and white was important. That comes back all the time, but just nobody did it the way they did in the 60s with the vinyl and all of that. It was just the best. And then the maxi coat after the mini skirt that's so short they had to put hot pants, put a crotch in it. Eventually they just made the skirts long, and the midi was very unpopular with right at the mid calf. But then the maxi became a little bit more popular with the gowns and you know, the long coats and all of that. But none of it stayed around for too long. But it comes back. It comes back again. There's your some of your maxi dresses from the late 60s, early 70s. And then, of course, we have Nancy Reagan. And just quickly with her, she was not apologetic about having spent 4 figures on a dress. She just believed in elegant fashion, and so she didn't apologize for it. So she did have a lot of beautiful clothes. That's her inauguration dress, of course. Beautiful red. What can I say? Pantsuits and headbands, I don't know what to tell you. Ugly Christmas sweaters. I mean, she's done a lot with her life. I don't think she's ever been the epitome of fashion. But that's okay. She's done a lot. That's her inauguration dress. Yeah, the portraits. Oh, she loved her pantsuits. Absolutely. Michelle Obama loved to show off her arms. She does have very nice arms. And I thought she dressed really nicely. That's her first inauguration ball dress. And then the second one I liked better. I liked that one a lot. And Jason Wu was her main designer for at least her inauguration dresses. And to finish up, I had to just show you the comparison because they were doing that. I thought Melania looked gorgeous. But again, the bracelet sleeves, the long gloves, it's similar, not in style, but the color and the feel, I thought. Same thing with the inauguration gown, with very modern, but not that far off from the one that Michelle Obama wore. So I thought that was fascinating, having that combination. And there you go. Thank you so much. I know it was long.